Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar. I'm Jenny Bailey from the Agile Business Consortium. We're the not-for-profit member organisation who are leading, promoting and enabling business agility worldwide. Now, as with our webinars, please feel free to post your questions to us, and I'll do my best to include these at the end of the presentation. Also, if you want to raise your hand at any point, we'll be able to see this on the system, and we'll be able to come to you if you have a question, or if you'd like to add something to the webinar, that won't be a problem. Now, we are also recording this webinar, so everyone who's registered will receive the recording and the slide presentation and everything in the end in the follow-up email that we send out, so you'll get the recording. So without further ado, today I'm joined by Vikram Jain, who is the founder and managing director of JCURV. JCURV is a London-based management consultancy working with several FTSE 100 organisations, and they have a mission to increase the UK's agility. So welcome, Vikram, and thank you for taking the time out with to join us today.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Tell us a little bit about JCURV and when really you kind of started learning really about Agile and how you work in that space, because JCURV's quite a new organisation, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So in terms of JCURV then, so we've been going for 3 years and our mission is to help increase the UK's agility. You know, a very humble objective really, but the way it was formed is that I've been a management consultant for the last 17 years, on and off, and kind of what I saw in the last few years is just the pace of change is so much, and as a specialist in change management, I started to see more and more that organisations are really struggling with keeping up with the pace of change, and also our tools and techniques as a change manager were just not fit for purpose anymore. And so, during the work with a few clients, I stumbled across Agile while working with the CIO of a large retailer, and they were trying to apply Agile within the IT world, and they were still really struggling with achieving the results that they really wanted to achieve. And I looked at kind of the reasons why, and it was clear that the broader organisation and the exco of the business really didn't understand or buy into working cross-functionally, learning fast, failing fast, and all the other principles around Agile. So I guess what I took from that is that actually that maybe there's a better way of applying Agile across the organisation, which will deliver a better impact really. So our focus as a business is to help increase the agility of the enterprise rather than just focusing on an IT project, for example, and we seem to be getting some really good results.
Fantastic. So if we move on to our credentials, as it were, you can see there that you've got 17 years consulting, and you're a specialist in enterprise-wide agility. You work a lot with the FTSE 100 organisations, don't you? And you've probably seen some common things that they all do and they've done. But we've been talking before. There's a certain fear out there, I think, at the moment, isn't there, regarding Agile, regarding the need to transform. Have you seen a lot of that recently?
Yeah, well, I mean, for the last few years, I think things have changed. I mean, the conversation's definitely changed in the last few years. So when we first started the business, I would say there was a very low level of understanding, or even, even understanding of the word Agile at an executive or board level. I think in the last 12, 18 months, that's literally exponentially increased in terms of people's awareness of the term. The understanding of what it is, I think that's still very low, but clearly this is becoming more of a board agenda now, because I think all organisations are recognising that they just need to move faster, but there's a lot of impediments in the way to do that.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start then. The outcomes that we're looking at to complete today, really, we've got 3 main objectives, haven't we?
Yeah, so in terms of what I wanted to cover off today is give you an opportunity as perhaps as an Agile practitioner just to step back a little bit and cover off a couple of things. So one is if we just look at it from a UK perspective, what is the big challenges that the UK corporates and the country's got as a whole? and then getting in a bit more detail, but just gaining some insights into how the benefits and opportunities around applying agile way of working across an enterprise. And then I'm sure you'll be interested in to understand, how is it, what we've found anyway, what is the best approach to kind of get onto the journey at an enterprise level of how do we take organizations on a transformation journey from the start really, and in a sustainable way.
Absolutely. No, there's three very big objectives there, and we're really looking forward to talking you through this, because obviously your experience, it's like the day to day of how you work with the FTSE 100 organisations. So it's going to be a real insight into us, and we're looking forward to this webinar in particular. So talk us through, if you can, then some of your clients and some of your experiences regarding these.
Yeah. Okay. So, we work primarily, with kind of FTSE 100, FTSE 250 organisations. Most of our kind of conversations start at exco level, board level. And as I said, what's been quite interesting, some of the clients, brands that you can see there, I mean, these are some of examples, some of the businesses our teams worked with in the last few years. But a lot of the organisations we've been speaking to have kind of all been stating something very similar in terms of a challenge. As you can see on the right, a lot of them are saying that, they're recognizing that the approach to change is just not fit for purpose anymore. They're all saying that the world's spinning so quickly, and what they're doing, how they're working, is just not working anymore in terms of maintaining a competitive edge versus some of the new up and coming businesses. The pure play digital players are obviously just stealing a march in terms of the rate at which they can innovate and get things out there. And obviously they're getting a lot of pressure from shareholders to actually deliver some great results. At the same time, they've got a lot of frustration. We're seeing most organizations we're working with that are a lot more disengagements of their frontline staff in terms of ability to get things done, frustrating with the pain it takes to manage and deliver change in the organization. So they're seeing their engagement scores go down. Obviously, a lot of frustration of not being able to get things done at all angles or all levels of the organization. And thus, a lot of them are just saying, well, what is an alternative approach? And actually, some CEO said to me, look, we've tried everything else. What else can we do? Because there's almost no downside, because everything else we're trying is just not working really. So this creates an opportunity to kind of start talking about an alternative approach to management change in our way. It's kind of using agile ways of working.
Right, okay. There was that other quote, wasn't there, that one of the managing directors of the FTSE 100 organisation said it takes 2 years to do what our competitors can do in 2 months. I mean, the realisation of that must be so strong in terms of the market and the competitive advantage that some of these other newer organisations can have, because they can adapt and they can be more flexible.
Yeah, I mean, some of our clients or companies we're talking to, I mean, we asked one company we're working with, like, when was the last time you launched a new product? And they kind of said, well, 2 years ago. And also, so on average, how long does it take to launch new products? And they were like, well, we've only launched one in the last 2 years. So let's just say the average is 2. Wow. And this is the situation. And, a lot of our organizations or a lot of our clients kind of facing really is that it's very painful. Some of it's self-created, but it just feels very painful for them to actually manage and deliver genuine change in the market, where again, some of the more nimbler, online players or startups are able to kind of just keep iterating and keep kind of launching new changes.
And how important would you say the culture of these organisations is, to get the right culture right and the leadership quality right, and the small groups working on projects and that sort of thing? The agile way, really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll get into that in a bit more detail later on. But I mean, going back to my rationale of why I started JCURV, is that what this CIO was focusing on initially was just trying to get tools and techniques being applied to their teams.
Right.
But we kind of showed that was only 10-20% of the way of unleashing the real benefits of working in agile way. The real big stumbling block or the blocker to helping this organization increase its speed to market and effectiveness and efficiency was all about trying to change the broader mindset and behaviors of other functions, so that if they could get all work together, actually that we knew that we could save literally weeks and months of effort and wasted time in getting things out.
Okay. All right, let's move on then. This is going to be interesting to see how you can do this, I guess.
Okay, so I guess, as I said, just standing back a second. So if we, based on the work that we've done with a number of FTSE 100 businesses and some research that we've done, what we're seeing in the market is that, organizations are effectively, about 70% inefficient in how they deliver change today. And when I talk about change, it could be launching new products, it could be delivering cost improvement programs, it could be improvement in key processes, all of those things. We see that organizations are about 70% inefficient in actually managing and delivering that change. We kind of don't say that in a ambitious or bullish way. We think that's quite conservative, actually. And using my previous example, if we see a lot that organizations almost can't launch new products, but they've got a team of 20 or 200 people working on things, and it's just literally just going around and around in circles. It's just a really good illustration. There's a lot of money being invested into trying to get change out there into the ecosystem, but organizations are really struggling with that. And obviously that comes with a certain amount of cost and frustration. And we did some kind of analysis just to understand and extrapolate, from a UK perspective. If we looked at the top FTSE 100 and just purely looked at how much time and effort is invested of people's time into managing, change programs which don't deliver, and also lost profit opportunity, we conservatively estimate that that's probably costing the FTSE 100 in excess of, £10 billion of kind of lost value by actually not getting things done quickly, efficiently, and effectively. And that the reason why, again, we can be very confident in those numbers, because we've only included a certain amount of cost in there. So that's people cost and lost profit opportunity across the FTSE 100. We haven't factored in how much time and effort spent onto, IT features, let's just say, which aren't actually valued or used, failed investment in assets, etc., etc. So there's a lot more money, what we believe is being lost from a FTSE 100 perspective. Again, which if we were able to harness, could make a significant difference from a UK economy perspective.
Absolutely, that's a staggering number, isn't it? I mean, the 70% inefficiency, that's just mind-blowing, really, in some respects, and saving that sort of cost as well. It's incredible. Okay, so how are things done?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, and I'm assuming that a lot of you guys are all Agile practitioners out there, so I apologise for kind of repeating stuff you already know. But I guess what we see clearly is that, organizations have got a bright idea, and ultimately they're trying to monetize, whether it's a cost reduction program, whether it's getting a product out there, whether it's improving our existing products to make more money, etc., etc. Obviously that's kind of the challenge they have. However, the way they organize themselves to create that kind of, or contribute to that 70% inefficiency, is that you obviously pass the baton from one, let's just say, design team or analysis team to a bunch of design teams, testing teams, product development teams. And obviously this is all kind of, that baton passing, or that waterfall approach does result in a lot of wasted time and effort and inefficiency. And we can then add to that is that because we've got multiple teams across multiple silos, all trying to solve a problem independently, you then have to add, a bunch of overhead to manage each individual silo. And obviously then you have to have kind of very powerful project management offices, big program managers to kind of smash their way through the organizational bureaucracy in order to hopefully get that solution out there to actually make a difference to the bottom line. So that's kind of, again, what we see most organizations kind of are set up like. Lots of silos, lots of competitive kind of teams trying to almost stop work being done, really. And obviously it's not done intentionally. It's just because they're not kind of all aligned around one common challenge.
Sure.
And if you look at the characteristics, I mean, we see that there's multiple handoffs to different functions. Each team's got a different priority. So if you hand over a piece of work to a team, they've obviously got a different priority, and obviously then they're going to queue it in a different way and prioritize in a different way. All the teams are working on the solution part-time. We see that as one of the biggest challenges to productivity. There's teams working kind of, let's just say you're working on one particular new product development challenge. Everyone's working on 3 or 4 things at the same time, which ultimately slows the particular priority project down quite considerably if you have to wait for someone to finish working on 2 other projects before they can come and do their 1 day a week or something like that on this particular challenge. And then obviously, teams are split across offices and geographies, which creates its own kind of inefficiencies of communication as well. So that's kind of like some of the characteristics that we see of how organizations are setting themselves up to kind of, compete in this very dynamic and fast changing world today. And obviously what that results in is that, you've got a slow cycle time from idea to monetized solution. Clearly, there's a lot of cost built up into there of, paying for lots of overhead to manage through that process, as well as kind of a lot of wasted effort in terms of kind of, misinterpretation of kind of what requirements are and how the baton is passed. You can see that if we're handing over pieces of work to different teams at the same time, you're going to have communication issues and obviously rework as people kind of go, well, I don't like that, I'm pushing that back to the previous team to work on because we want it in a different way. And the other piece that we see is that usually the customer's not even anywhere involved in any of this process, resulting in teams working on things which actually have little or no value to the end user as well. So that's kind of like what we see as the kind of characteristics of how organizations are kind of setting themselves up today.
Yes, and I think we've demonstrated there is going to be very familiar actually to a lot of people that are tuning in to our webinar today. I was just curious actually, just to try a little exercise, if this is familiar to you and you've been stuck in one of those silos before, you've had the bright idea and you've got the management overhead that are kind of developing ideas and trying to get things through, and the whole idea is becoming slow and things have got stuck in the process, and you recognise what Vikram's just very clearly demonstrated really in this diagram. Just raise your hands. I'd just like to see just an interaction there of how many hands are actually going to shoot up, whether or not you're familiar with this. Yes, actually, Vikram, that's interesting. A lot of people here are raising their hands, so thank you for that. I appreciate your involvement, taking part in the webinar. That does look a very common analysis, really, of how it is today, by the looks of it.
Yeah, so it's good that I don't live in my own little bubble.
No. No, you're not in your little bubble. We're all in that bubble with you in some respects, by the looks of it.
Yeah, and so this is why I think that you see that frontline colleagues are obviously very frustrated with this, but they're sat in the middle of this spider web, really trying to solve a problem, and obviously then removed from that as the exec saying, well, this is a simple challenge. Why can't we get things out there? So we're seeing frustration at kind of both ends of the kind of the organisational constructs. So I guess it'd be worthwhile just going through an example we saw with one particular banking client that we worked with, just to kind of really illustrate how that costs an organisation.
Can I just ask, how long ago was this example though, just so we can be clear on it?
Kind of 2 years ago.
Right. Okay.
1.5 years.
Okay. Lovely.
So we came across a bank which has a credit card division, and basically the bank was trying to launch, or had launched, a new credit card product. And basically we were asked to kind of come in and it didn't go as quickly as they wanted it to, and they were saying, could you help us understand, and help us actually try and increase the speed at which we launch new products. So kind of in our analysis to understand kind of what's happened in the past, we basically did a kind of a value-added analysis of their timeline of launching a new product. So we understood that to launch a new product, it took them 18 months. And what we did was we analysed, out of that 18 months, what parts slowed them down, and how long did that cost in terms of time, of what in terms of the cost of the slowdown. So if you can see, we've got this nice circular box there. We've got 18-month profile, and what we've done is we started to look at what slowed things down, and ultimately what was the value-added areas. And what I want to do now is quickly just take you through some of the key components which we saw kind of slow their process down, which again amplifies some of the messages I just gave. So, what we saw is that out of the 18 months of launching the new products, 3 months were just completely wasted, in their opinion, because they actually lacked customer insight. So the teams believe they spent 3 months on working on things which basically didn't actually address the customer needs. Because they didn't have the customer in the center of the room, they were working on things based on either highest person paid opinion, or they were working on things based on people's guesses in the room as well. So they felt that a lot of time was wasted on that.
Right.
And then on top of that, they found that 2 months of that 18 months was just lost due to rework. There was no one single person accountable for the outcome. They had a steering committee, and because they didn't have almost a North Star in terms of the customer requirements, they were just prioritizing based on varying different people's opinions. There was obviously a lot of discussion, disagreement around what actually they wanted. So when teams were producing things, the steering group was pushing back and saying, no, we want this now, no, we want that now. Rather than being guided by the customer, they were guided by some politics. And so the team factored in 2 months of time was just spent working and waiting on things which actually just weren't agreed.
Goodness, incredible. Okay.
We also found that kind of 1.5 months going to now kind of decision making is that they had a steering group which met once a month, and made up of very senior people. And they factored in, they spent something like 1.5 months waiting for decisions to be made. And again, this is quite common kind of occurrence. What we see is that a lot of clients have steering groups which obviously expect a lot of detail. So some of our clients sometimes expect up to 100 pages of reports to be submitted to steering groups before they meet. And even with all of that detail, they still aren't able to make decisions off the back of that, either because they fear of the repercussions of making decisions, or they have almost an addiction to wanting more and more fact or more detail to give them the 101% confidence that that is the right decision to be made.
Wow.
So again, if we flip back to agile ways of working, producing minimal viable products, testing and learning, that culture doesn't exist. Meaning they were looking for the perfect data. So the team spent a long time actually just waiting for decisions to be made, or if indecision was causing that problem really. So 1.5 months was spent doing that. Interestingly, just going back to that kind of high expectation of paperwork, the teams factored in that actually spent 1 month of time. This is a team of 20. They spent 1 month of time basically preparing for steering groups and following up on steering groups. So as I said, one of our clients is a large insurer. Before we started working with them, we actually got a sight of some of their steering group reports, and it was something like every exec was expected to read something like 400 pages of documents before they got to the meeting.
Oh my goodness. That's not good. That's going to stop things straight away, isn't it? 400 pages to get through.
And we interviewed the steering group members, and we said to them, so it's an amazing amount of work that you have to do in advance of these steering groups. Do you read that material? So I just don't have the time.
Goodness.
So it was almost what they did like is the third factor of the reports, which gave them the reassurance that the thinking had been done. However, they all acknowledged that it didn't help much of having that matter report, because it didn't filter out the key insights and also the decision points which they needed to kind of discuss in the meetings. So the whole addiction to having these steering groups and kind of, that feeding up to a kind of all-powerful, all-knowledgeable steering group, which actually we found didn't make decisions anyway, caused the teams, 1 month of delay in actually getting a product out there.
Yeah, I can see how time's just going by on this. It's incredible. And you were telling us that this is a conservative estimate. You think?
Yeah, well, this is just one example. We see, as I said, we can get to 100% inefficiency because some products or some solutions don't even ever get out because they by the time they try and release it, it's kind of out of date, or they've lost the stakeholder because they've been taking so much time that they've done a restructure in that time, and we're back to square one again. Just continuing, so half a month we estimated was lost due to handoff. So again, waiting for the next member of the cascade, another function, to pick up the baton and start working on stuff. We found there was a lot of waiting time and delay in between handing things over. The biggest thing we saw, though, is that part-time working was almost the killer of any productivity. On average, when we do surveys with our clients, we find that most clients are working on about 3 projects at the same time. And you've hopefully all seen that kind of stat around, if you work on 1 project at a time, you're obviously kind of 100% effective or productive. 2 projects at the same time, now you're suddenly 60% productive, and obviously declines quite quickly. And what we see is that there's a lot of waiting time if we're waiting for Alex and Alice to come to this meeting or start working on this particular challenge, and we need some compliance support, or we need an expert to come in and help on certain things, but they've got 2 other projects on at the same time. The delay costs are huge, so we factored in something like 6 months was spent on just waiting for teams to just be there and actually start working on something.
Goodness, that is crucial, isn't it?
So that's the biggest lever. That's the biggest lever of opportunity, and quite naturally, as you get into kind of agile ways of working, the big challenges that we speak to our execs about is that, okay, if we're asking you to put people full time on a project in order to address that inefficiency, it means you're going to have to have less in your objectives, and be brave about that, because a lot of leaders just want to do everything right now. And what we try and help them understanding, actually doing less equals doing more, because you can actually move more quickly on a fewer level of things, but do them really well.
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I guess the other couple of things then is just rework. So we had this team was working across geographies, and again, they estimated about half a month was lost on, again, is a similar thing to the silos, is that, even if we had a similar team but working in a different geography, just waiting for those teams who perhaps, again, have a different set of priorities, just waiting for them to come back kind of wasted another half a month. So if we kind of total that up, out of that 18 months, only 3.5 months was estimated to be value added, and actually, valuable to launch the solution. And in total, that was kind of 14.5 months of time was just lost in some very basic activities, which were just not required really. Now, when we looked at the product, the business case was worth £5 million a year. And if you kind of and then extrapolate the cost of delay for 14.5 months of not being able to launch that product, it actually equated to about £6 million worth of lost profit for every obviously just for that product not being launched, which is equate to about the cost of delay was about £400,000 a month.
That's staggering.
So for example, if we said, look, let's put everyone on this dedicated way of working, so we now have full-time teams, that's 6 months. We could have saved potentially 6 months of efforts, which could have delivered literally a couple of £1 million worth of opportunity. We could have released that product a couple of months, half a year in advance. But teams don't, I guess businesses can't see that cost delay very well. So that's kind of what we saw overall, is that there's a huge amount of waste in kind of management of change in this perspective, and this hopefully just gives an illustration that this is just one of many examples that we could show of how inefficient organisations are actually way of delivering change.
Do you use this as an example then to your clients? Do you actually take this into the boardrooms and say, this is typical what's currently happening out there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we absolutely we do, and we use it with banks, we use it with retailers and service companies. And what's nice is, similar to what that small poll we've just done with the team here. But most organisations will go, "Yep, that's us. We do like steering groups, do like our reports, and
Goodness.
oh yeah, we take pride in having teams flogging themselves, trying to work on 3 or 4 priorities at the same time." So they all kind of recognise it. I think they don't know necessarily what else they could do there.
So they see the lost opportunity basically then, and try and work a way of actually working around it, so they can avoid all this lost time and lost profit as well. I mean, that's huge when you're talking to a large organisation or any organisation. 6 million is huge.
Exactly, and that's where you can just start extrapolating and say, just for the FTSE 100, you can see how you can get to 10, plus billion pounds worth of wasted opportunity. And obviously the 70% inefficiency ratio there.
It's interesting that organisations actually see themselves in that cycle as well, like you say. I mean, they're almost sort of pointing out where they are in that, really, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And what's quite interesting is, you speak to the average executive, they'll almost say, well, this is how they've been successful. Most execs maybe have got 20, 30 years experience, and they've been very successful to get to that level by working in a waterfall approach. And, obviously the reason why they've been successful is they've been able to kind of fight their way through all this treacle in order to get change happening. That's one reason. And I think obviously that what's previously maybe unacceptable in terms of the time to get things out into market, clearly not anymore, because we're just all the cycle times are rapidly shortening. So what's been successful in the past, or the problems which they've faced in the past, are now being amplified massively in the environment that we're operating in. So that they're really, most organisations or execs we speak to are just struggling because they're going, well, this thing which was made me very successful in the past is just not working anymore.
Right. Okay. So times are changing, which is a good thing, I guess, in some respects, because there's an opportunity there, isn't there, to definitely tighten things up. So if we look, that's more of the traditional, obviously, way, the waterfall approach, as it were, or the example you've given there. Let's move on then to more of the agile way of working.
Yeah. So again, for the practitioners out there, I apologise for covering long ground, but clearly, what we're aiming to do is, we help organisations really just apply agile principles across the enterprise, and initially across a few kind of key business problems or business challenges. So naturally, we introduce an iterative approach. And I've got this illustration of this kind of an average sprint pattern, and obviously we also then start establishing teams as agile teams, where we've got a product owner who's singular accountability on the outcomes and prioritizing what they need to focus on. Again, obviously that then starts eliminating the need of having big steering groups and paperwork, etc. And obviously now we've got a lot more accountability and empowerment with the delivery teams to make stuff happen as well. So I guess the characteristics that we kind of try and instill in our clients is having team members working full time, co-located ideally, especially within the first few sprints, just to learn this way of working and build the relationships before they kind of go back to their home offices or home locations. Creating that cross-functional team. And again, that's usually a very big challenge, for businesses which have got lots of silos. Again, so we always ask our organizations to place in the team straight from day one people who can design, build, and deploy solutions, rather than multiple teams doing those separate individual activities. And obviously then we try and empower the teams to actually make the decisions. So these obviously have big implications on how we manage organizations and how leaders have to operate as well. And we'll get into how we go about kind of trying to address those. So those are obviously the characteristics, and hopefully you guys all know this, but it obviously results in things going faster, significantly reducing the cost of development, because we can get rid of a lot of the waste that we've just described earlier. We know that we definitely increase productivity of teams at least by 50% onwards. And what we know, we do surveys every month with all our transformation programs, and we can definitely see that engagement levels of the teams go up by anything up to 50%. On average, it's about 41% of engagement levels going up, because suddenly when we ask teams, do you feel like you're making a difference? Is it easy to get things done? Are you actually enjoying yourself now? Those scores seem to just go up quite significantly, because teams are actually getting things done using an iterative approach.
It makes sense as well, doesn't it? At the end of the day, it just makes sense when you look at that and putting those strategies into place in the agile ways of working. It just makes sense. Of course, everybody wants to feel that they're contributing and making something happen, and not getting held up by management and the silos and the process of before, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the next big question is, how do we go around kind of trying to embed that into an agile way of working into an organization? And naturally, we have lots of questions around that, and some of our clients or potential clients will go, well, do we have to start off with doing a restructure by creating product owner roles and putting everyone else in delivery roles, etc., etc.? Our approach is slightly different, so we've got as any good consultant, we've got a 4-step approach or a 3-step approach.
Right.
And what I can do now is take you through kind of our approach and trying to help an organization start from the very start. So, if we were going to get in and start with any particular company, this is the kind of key steps of how we start organizations on their agile transformation.
Okay.
So our first step is what we call trying to create a clear and safe environment. And what we mean by that is that rather than quickly jumping to, I don't know, let's just say an IT team or one small, delivery team and getting them going, the first thing we do is trying to tackle the behavioral and cultural impediments which will impact the sustainability of any new way of working. So our first intervention is working with the executive team, and let's just say the transformational leads, on what we call creating a clear and safe environment. So when we talk about clear, it means that we're asking our leaders to define the B point or the end position they want to get to in, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years, and actually state what it is that the organization is going to have achieved by that point. So getting really clear around outcomes, and almost helping leaders start leading again. Because leaders really should be just saying, here's where you want to go, and unblocking any impediments and empowering the teams to get off and do stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So that's the first thing, is we ask leaders to get very clear on the critical few outcomes they want to achieve in the next, 1, 2, 3 years. Once we've done that, the next piece that we get them to do is we actually immerse them in an agile way of working. So rather than lecturing them, and I'm sure boring them like I'm probably doing with you guys in terms of a load of slides, we actually take them on agile safaris and get them to go and speak to other peers in other businesses. So we get CEOs to go and speak to CEOs, and exec teams to go and speak to other exec teams who have been on the journey already, to go and break that paradigm shift in their minds about what's possible in working in an agile way. So as a result of that, and a bit of immersion through playing with Lego games and all sorts of bits, they actually come back and we get them to start defining a set of principles by which they will personally, as well as help encourage the rest of the teams to work within. So these principles can be items such as deliver value early and often, and we have a set of behaviors behind that, or learn fast and fail fast is another potential principle. Other principles that other clients have brought out are like be brave, to address the indecision which some organizations face. They bring that out as a key principle. But generally, these principles we get leaders to start role modeling are principles which will help address their specific barriers, behavioral barriers of what impacts them being more fast, more efficient, more effective at delivering change.
Okay.
So we ask them to define those principles and immediately start role modeling those principles. Okay, so we're starting to change the way the leadership think about these things. And a really good first test in that is that then we'll start asking them, okay, what are the critical 1 to maximum 3 big priorities that you want to address as an experiment in using agile ways of working? And naturally, leaders, as I said, like doing everything, so if we've got 10 priorities, let's go and get 10 things done. What we try and do is to test their mettle in applying principles and say, actually, let's try and do a few things, but let's do a few things well. So where do you want to go and experiment? So as a result of them kind of getting very clear on what they want to achieve and also the guide rails by which they're going to achieve them, this hopefully starts creating a safe environment by which all the other team members can then operate. And we always say, for example, if we're encouraging teams to, build minimum viable products and test and learn in the market, but the leaders are very uncomfortable and like gold plating everything, clearly you're going to have a clash and you're going to have a very frustrated agile team. So that's, again, just a good example of why we start with the executive team and get them to really create that safe environment by which these few pilot teams can actually safely operate and actually do the right thing without potentially getting fired or hugely challenged because, well, I didn't want you to put something out there and testing with 50 customers. I feel very unsafe.
So it really does start from the top then, doesn't it?
And from our perspective, we will never work, and through some bad experiences, we will not work with an organization if we can't work with the executive. So we have, several cases where we'll say, look, a client will say to us, look, can you just, do some work with the head of this team and actually apply Agile there? We'll say, look, we'd love to, but it won't last very long, and it's a waste of your money to try and do that.
Sure.
And it almost forces the conversation. Let's go and have a conversation with the executive about this. So that's kind of our first step, really. The second step, as I was intimating, is that then we go and set and establish a few agile teams. Again, even if we've got we've just put a £1 billion transformation program through an agile transformation, and so we've applied agile to £1 billion worth of challenges in terms of trying to grow the revenues as well as cut costs. But rather than this, it's an easy to do is to then say, right, let's pick on 11 work streams which make up that £1 billion challenge, and let's start off with everything. We just say, right, let's start off with a few and let's experiment with this agile way of working there, and let's see how the organization responds. Let's see how we respond to the organization in terms of applying agile. And if it works well, and when it works well, we can then take those learnings and then modify our approach and then apply it to the next set of challenges as well.
Sure.
So it's a bit more grown up, it's a bit more paced, and it really does test the leaders in kind of their eagerness to just get everything done from the start. So we set up our agile teams, as you all well know, cross-functional, dedicated, empowered, et cetera, and in this case, let's just say we pick 3 big business outcomes to focus on, whether it's trying to increase our sales, trying to reduce our costs, trying to improve our productivity, et cetera. And then almost as soon as we've set those teams up and train them, we start iterating. Now everyone knows the agile or sprint pattern. They'll start sprinting, but we sprint obviously at the teams will be iterating at team level, but we also create an iteration at product owner level as well. So whereas the teams will be sprinting every couple of weeks, each product owner will be meeting on a weekly basis and a monthly basis to define what they want to achieve in the month and the next 3 months as well. And who joins us in those stand-ups, as we call them, at the product owner level, is not only the product owners of those particular challenges, but we also ask for the CEO or basically a member of the exco to come in and basically be a part of that team. And the reason why we do that then is that, if you think about any particular challenge, whether you hit an impediment, the worst thing, the longest it can take between a problem identified to it being discussed and hopefully being addressed is 6 days, where we can have, let's just say, a coding issue, a resourcing issue, we've hit a supplier problem. These can be escalated to the product owners and potentially the CEO within 6 days, and that then we can look to address those problems and hopefully then help unlock the teams trying to achieve their monthly goal.
I think also that helps with the clear and safe environment, doesn't it? With the exec team being on that stand up as well. They're all keeping an eye on what's going on and getting informed, really. And like you say, they can come up with those decisions when they're needed, and they can understand the progress that's being made.
Exactly. And what we do here is that we're connecting senior leadership straight to the the frontline challenges, whether it's we can celebrate success as a team, and the leaders can see hopefully the benefits of working in this new way, but also they can see, sometimes be horrified by some of the practices and processes which exist in the organization, which they go, I can't believe that happens. Let's go and fix that, and then fix it quite quickly. And some of the things which come out of that, which some of the agile teams will hit a problem. Let's just say they need £25,000, and they in the sprints they need 25k to fund an experiment or buy some handsets or whatever else it is. And what we found as an example is that the investment board process to actually apply and get funding for investments took 6 weeks.
Wow.
Now this is a company-wide timeline. Okay. So again, at our weekly stand-up with the chief executive, the team said, look, we can't deliver our month outcome because we've just found out that it'll take us 2 more weeks over our 4-week sprint to actually get funding for this solution. So we need to, what can we do? And obviously the natural instinct is to cut a corner and try and just, pull a favour. But what the great thing about having this stand up with the product owners and the CEO is that actually we can say, look, that's a systemic impediment. Let's try and rebuild the way we manage our investment process. So as a result of that problem, we identify that as a problem, and then now we've come up with a risk-based approach to getting investments. So now the broader organization will benefit from actually having a risk-based approach. So hopefully we start moving the broader organization in a more of a nimble and agile approach as well.
That makes a lot of sense, absolutely. And things won't take 6 weeks in the future then, will they?
Absolutely. So that's the third piece then. So we're iterating at all levels. As I said, that really it's brilliant in terms of educating and starting changing the mindsets of our leadership teams, as well as kind of recognizing the teams which are doing the great work that they should be doing. And the last step naturally is for us is basically then sustaining. So, within the first, let's just say 3 months to 6 months, we then start establishing communities of practice around product owners, around the methodology, around maybe some technical capabilities, around some any particular specific capabilities, and start setting up communities of practice which start taking ownership of that particular topic. And we can, as a business, we step back and ideally we're out of any agile transformation within 6 months, and the teams can self-sustain after that and continuously improve afterwards.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's just huge benefits for everyone, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you can imagine, kind of when we get onto the next slide, I mean, we've set up an engine which is now humming. We've kickstarted it. We've kind of got rid of the rust of the engine, and now it's humming. What we do with our teams is effectively on our transformation, we kind of, let's just say we've got 100% agility on the top right over time, and literally we're working with our teams to define what, rather than trying to plan for the whole of the next 3 years and trying to get to this perfect endpoint, all we're doing with our organizations is to say, okay, in the next 3 months, what do we want to achieve, which will help us move towards that big target? And then let's break that down into the 3 months, and let's break that down into what are we going to try and achieve in the next month. And then once we've got to the end of that iteration, we'll then review as a team, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and let's plan for the next 3 months, or let's plan for the next month, and let's then push forward and see what we can do in order to further iterate towards our big end goal. Wow.
And that's how it works. And that's what's achieved, and that's what's done with the engine running. And then after 6 months, they're fully sustainable, and it can just continue.
Yeah, I mean, and we've, as I said, one of the clients we worked with, we supported them on a £1 billion transformation program. Literally put everything through from revenue increase, cost reduction, productivity improvements, a lot of stuff. It was a core part of their overall strategy for 3 years. And, within 6 months, our team would have all left because we built enough capability we built the engine which could just continually improve the way it applied Agile within the business, and also it had the momentum and the proof points to continue without us involved.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. We really, really do appreciate it. We're coming on to the questions now, and I can see there's lots of people raising their hands to answer questions. So if we can just go back to the question slide, let's have a look. Sorry, I'm just trying to find everybody's questions that have come through. There's one that's here from Linda, actually, in London. I think she works in insurance. She's saying, what's the largest barrier, do you think, to people not working in an Agile way and looking at those strategic applications of Agile ways of working that are so valuable? But what would you say, Vikram, is that largest barrier that stops organizations? Would you say it's fear, or would you say it's something else? What would you say it is?
It's a big question,
yeah.
Obviously, but I think the biggest barrier really is it's going to be around culture and behaviours. So a lot of organisations kind of get the need to do something different, but I guess it's how do you change the way that people think, and actually how do you change people's perceptions of what's possible, in terms of how the business works as well. And I think that's the biggest impediment, really. So leadership, for me, if you get the leadership on board and creating that safe environment and creating that kind of role model for the rest of the organisation, that's where life becomes really, really easy.
Right, okay. Yeah, it is all about that leadership and the Agile culture. Obviously, the consortium has been working a lot on Agile culture and leadership recently within the framework for business agility. And you're aware of the work we've obviously been putting into that. But it is so crucial, isn't it, to get that, to get almost away from that command and control style of management that is almost like yesteryear now, isn't it, when you're talking in Agile terms?
Absolutely. And what I love is that the frontline organisation, the people who are doing the work, just once you've opened the taps, they'll love this approach. It's really just the access to it. So who's opening the door? That comes back down to the leadership team to kind of recognise that they need to do something different and recognise how they can work, and actually believe that there's an alternative way.
Absolutely. And then you can turn that oil tanker around, can't you? That's how it works.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. We're running out of time, but let me just say thank you so much, Vikram, for actually joining us this morning and giving us those amazing insights into the applications of Agile ways of working and how you actually conduct your consultancy, really, those 3-step processes and 4-step processes that you put into place, and also sharing with us the challenges of the strategic UK corporates and how they can increase productivity, because clearly, I mean, if they take on these Agile ways of working, it could make such a huge difference, couldn't it, in those FTSE 100 organisations?
Yeah, for sure. And again, going back to the challenge, we genuinely see that organisations are about 70% inefficient, if not more. So there's a massive opportunity here for every Agile practitioner to kind of support the challenge. And I think this is why we set our business up, because we think that if we can get all these individual businesses working in a different way, there's a big gain to be made from an economic perspective. So yeah, I think we're really excited about the work we do and what's the potential out there. I just wanted to also say thanks very much for everyone spending the time out of their working day and to listen in and ask questions. And evening,
and evening as well, and night, because we've got some people joining us here from New Zealand and Australia. There's a few from America that are joining in as well. So we really do appreciate you taking the time to actually listen in to the broadcast live. We are recording the broadcast, and we will make sure in the follow-up email we actually send a recording out to you also. We've also done our member survey recently for the Agile Business Consortium, and we are aware that people are fairly keen on some of our webinar times to be later in the afternoon. So we are going to be looking at that, and I am scheduling some later in the afternoon webinars, so we can include some more parts of the world to actually join us live, hopefully, on those. I know there's one coming up in April, for instance, that I'm talking to the presenter on currently. So keep an eye out on our website for more information regarding that on the events page. But for now, Vikram, thank you again for joining us and sharing those insights. I think it's been a really valuable broadcast for everybody listening, and everybody will receive it. This will also go on to our resources page on the website. We are a resource hub for so much information regarding Agile, and this will be there in place. So again, Vikram, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next webinar is going to be at 11 o'clock on Wednesday, the 8th of March, and that's when I'll be talking to Stuart James from Agilex. He's the author of the DSDM Agile Project Management contract that we put together a couple of years ago, I think it was now. We launched that. There was a huge demand for an Agile contract, and obviously with all these Agile ways of working now, we've got to look at procuring in an Agile way. So the procuring an Agile solution, the commercial realities of an Agile approach is going to be brought to you on Wednesday, the 8th of March at 11 a.m. with my guest, Stuart James from Agilex. But from now, me, Jenny Bailey, thank you very much for joining us. If you've got any further questions, I will actually send them through to Vikram and we can get them answered for you, and I'll include those also in the follow-up email. So Vikram, you're happy to answer some questions when they come through so we can keep the discussions open, yeah?
For sure, yeah, very open.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much again for joining us, everybody, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. Goodbye.